Welcome to Successful Philanthropy. I'm your host, Jean Shafiroff. This show is designed to highlight the work of philanthropic leaders here in the United States and then internationally. With us today, Dr. Samuel Waxman. Dr. Waxman is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of the Waxman Cancer Institute. Let's all welcome Sam Waxman. And Sam, it is a great honor to have you back on this show. And I want to first start with a little bit about the Waxman Foundation. You are almost 50 years old. How did you begin, and why did you start the foundation?
Well, always nice to be with you, Gene. I admire the way you do your show. It's well thought out and actually brings a lot of information to people, and congratulations once again. Very quickly, it was purely the philanthropy of a single individual who had met me briefly and heard that I did, quote, good research. And at the same time, I was also treating patients, and I happened to treat his nephew for Hodgkin's disease, and he did well, and we established a relationship. That was in 1978, and he made a very generous donation of $10,000 just on the feel of me, so to speak. And that $10,000 in philanthropy has now translated to over $100 million that we've raised over the years. So I would think that was a really good investment on Irving's part. And for me professionally, enabled me initially to grow my research program, which has always been an important part of my life, from a small working lab to a group at Mount Sinai that had about 25 PhDs. And I was the director of that lab, and we ended up publishing over 300 important contributions to cancer research. It enabled me to build an international network of scientists around the world, so that today we are supporting, in collaboration, over 30 different labs in this country and additional labs in Israel, China, and Canada. And we're all focused on a very specific entity, and that is how to decrease the rising incidence of cancer due to increased longevity.
And Sam, I don't mean to interrupt you, but earlier today you said the incidence of cancer is on the rise, even with young people.
Correct.
And this is very, very alarming to someone like me, because why should, with all the research being done and everyone concerned about what they eat and what they do and how they live, why is cancer on the rise in young people and then, of course, in older people? What is exactly going on, and what can we do about it?
Well, the first thing that's most important is we have to be aware of it. I mean, people just say, well, I'm not going to get cancer until I'm 50 or 60 and older. So they did not be younger people were not being screened. So we don't know for sure what it is that is making this rise. It's not a lot of people, but it's a measurable number of increase. Whether it's 15 or 25% increase, it's still a small number of young people, but it's there. We believe it is due to interfering with normal regulation of tissues as you age, because we start aging from the day we're born, and everybody ages at a different rate, and tissues within your body age at a different rate, and cells within your tissues age differently. It's affected by fat that you might have. It may be inflammation generated by your metabolism. It may be genetic in the way you handle inflammation. There may be genetic errors that will promote your inability to repair DNA as it's damaged. But why now? Why now? And one reason is probably there's been a change in diet, particularly here in the United States. People are eating less healthy foods, so to speak. They're There's a lot of there's not enough exercise. Obesity is rampant. Uh, um, I can't measure the role of stress, but somehow one would think that stress is increasing pathways that diminish repair mechanisms in your body. So, how would you attack that? Well, very straightforward. We need to be able to judge what your health status is. What is your biological stage in life when you're 20 or my age and in between? So one of the things the foundation is really working with collaborators, how can we establish what your real biologic age is and what risk factors have you been developing? Very much like for heart disease, we know there's a risk factor with lipids and things of that type. Well, we have to do the same thing with cancer. Measure your biologic age, find out what is being developed that's a risk, and at the same time, measure cancer risk on top of that so you can get a combined risk of longevity prediction and cancer risk. And try to do that early in life rather than late in life and intervene with what you find the risk that can be targeted and corrected. That's the mission of what we want to do going forward as an international program.
And just for people watching this show, very important, I would think, is what we put into our bodies, the water we drink, and then the food we eat. So, what advice would you give to people solely on diet so that they may reduce the possibility that they would get cancer in the future?
Gene, that's a question that you've asked me now since I've known you, and I wish I had the very simple answer. I still think it's individual. I mean, there can be people, as we know, that have done everything wrong that you think would create cancer, and there they are at 90, really doing well. And then there are people who and families that have to be 100, and no matter what they do, they didn't get cancer. So there are a lot of things we don't know. So anything that I say has to be studied exactly the way I'm talking about. Give you an example. We're now looking at a new class of drugs that can get people to lose weight. And I've read somewhere around 10 or 15% of the people in the United States are taking this drug. And there are a lot of things going around saying, well, it decreases heart disease when you lose 30 or 40 pounds, or maybe even decreases cancer. And that's great, but we don't know why, and we don't know who. So in order to answer your question, you have to establish risk in an individual. And then if you know what your aging risk is and your cancer risk, you can come up with a number. And if you have that, then you can say, all right, take this weight reduction program and we'll measure this again in a few years. And if those risk factors diminish, then you know something is happening. So you can be found, that's the future. Now, in the present, what is known is that there are certain elements in diet that could increase cancer and heart and every other kind of risk. So obesity is a problem, but not everybody who's obese is going to get cancer, obviously. But it's a risk factor for disease in general. You know, the obvious ones, of course, are smoking and excess alcohol, an unbalanced diet, but no one really has been able to come up with a cancer protection diet. I don't know of it. And if they say it has not been tested clinically, I wrote a whole chapter on that years ago. Is there a cancer protection diet? And I could not find evidence that I could say to you, you take this, you're going to diminish it. Hearsay, hearsay, hearsay. That's why you need an institute to really come up with honest answers. So be logical. In balanced diet, less fat, stays trim, clearly exercise is important. And there is why we're not sure. But if you exercise a mouse and you put some tumor cells under their skin, as compared to a mouse in the same situation that doesn't exercise, the cancer doesn't grow as quickly if they exercise. So some way the exercise does diminish and produce a biologic response that decreases cancer cells from growing. I won't go into all those things, but I think it's always recommended to stay lean and exercise. And there is some science, clinically, studies to show that, as well as laboratory information. So we'd like to be able to put that in the risk factor. What is it that exercise does, whether it's a change in oxidative metabolism or anything like that? Let's measure it in people before and see what happens as they go older and exercise. Does that metabolism stay healthy, so to speak, or does it go cancerous-like? Because cancer cells metabolize differently than non-cancer cells.
Very useful and helpful information. Now, Sam, people say that the environment may be causing cancer, the cell phones, the constant being in front of a computer. What do you say about that? Do you have any information about that as it relates to cancer growth, or is there no relation?
I don't have any information that would shed any positive light on that. You know, I hear the same thing you hear, but I put this under the heading of hearsay. And so people get cancer out of the blue. They don't understand why. And they blame their cell phone, or you hold it, you get a brain tumor, so you're going to get a brain tumor from your cell phone. There's no proof for that. I mean, there's other reasons to come up with things you could study, but the main driver of getting cancer is the aging process. So the brain undergoes changes in this tissue that enables cancer to grow better. So let's not focus on those issues. Let's focus on what makes cancer happen, really. And then if you know how it happens, then you could ask the question specifically. We know that you need A, B, C to get cancer as we age. All right, let's see what happens to people that use the cell phone. Do they have A, B, C? Then you can maybe connect the two. Not necessarily, but it may allow you to say, oh, cell phone users have all of these risk factors. Maybe it's related to that. So, but until you do that, I think you're making you a little bit crazy to hear all these things that people say about getting cancer, because it is such a startling disease to suddenly be confronted with. One day you have it, the next day, the day before, you didn't know you had it. Keeping in mind that cancer doesn't happen like that. It's a slow growing process most of the time. We have warnings in our blood that we haven't really gotten to understand. That's another thing. These warning cells that we have and now being studied increase with age. And it's a risk factor, a real risk factor for getting cancer. Not everybody will get cancer when they have these group of cells, but at least it's a risk factor. I want to measure that in people. That's real. And that's being studied as we speak. So there's tangible evidence you can trace this. Why these cells increase with age is a question we ask. So that's science at work. And that's why it's important for you and I have this talk. That's why it's important the foundation to raise money and get this job done. Let me give you one quick fact, because this is a message that everybody should know. Most research for cancer today is coming from philanthropy. Don't forget it. For example, the National Institutes of Health, particularly the National Cancer Institute, budget has not gone up. It's flattened, which means with inflation, there's about a 7% decrease in the budget. And that's been happening for a while, and increased cost for everyone. Only 8% of fundable science that was approved for funding gets funds. That means over 90% of good ideas do not get money from government. That's startling. More
So
of that money is coming from you people we're speaking to. You're making it happen. You're making the Waxman Foundation being able to really fund great science that ordinarily would not be funded by governmental sources. And so that's why it's so important to have these talks with you.
yes, and Sam, I remember many years ago, I think it was in the around 2004, my father, who was quite elderly then, had been diagnosed with lymphoma. And we consulted with you, and you had suggested, because of his age in his 80s, that he be treated in a less radical way than, say, someone much younger. And you actually worked with him, your group, and he then went on to live well into his 90s and died of something completely else, it's completely different. But he had great quality of life by doing less of a radical treatment for his cancer. So my question is, as people age and get older, is it necessary to have a radical approach to cancer treatment, or do you prefer something a little more gentle and a little less invasive, or is that a question you can't answer?
I'll try, like I usually do. It's not a simple answer. Firstly, uh, people have the wrong idea about cancer and aging. It really turns out that if one gets cancer as they get older, the cancer is more difficult to treat. The cancer tends to be more able to recur and spread. The immune system is debilitated as you get older. So you're losing a lot of mechanisms that you have when you're younger that help fight cancer. So it becomes more challenging to treat an older person. Cancer occurs predominantly after the age of 65. You already have that problem. So one has to be able to be appropriate if there's a form of cancer that you have good treatments for. Don't keep it away from an older person, no matter how radical it may be. So it really depends on how good your treatment is and what your biological health of the person at a given age. A 90-year-old like your dad, he was in good shape, but the treatment, the kind of cancer he had was not one that was that clinically aggressive you could watch and see. And the treatments were more or less to maintain it rather than trying to eradicate it, which we couldn't do then. Didn't have the ability to eradicate it. Today it would be maybe differently. We have treatments that are much more scientifically based, and maybe we could eradicate it, and the treatment may be targeted to the problem that caused that cancer. So we can't let age be a determinant of who gets treated and who does not get treated. Everyone should be age appropriately treated based on type of cancer and treatment available. Does
And
it help?
Sam, I want to thank you for all the help that you gave to my family when my father had this problem with cancer. For our audience, we are with Samuel Waxman. He is the Chief Executive Officer and the founder of the Samuel Waxman Cancer Research Foundation. Now, Sam, you have a big gala coming up, your #1 gala of the season, where you raise millions and millions of dollars. And I think that's November 21st, 2024. It's in New York City, but I want you to talk about it to the audience because I've been, it's a wonderful gala with great entertainment. A lot of people come out for this gala. You raise millions of dollars. Please talk about it and then how we can all support your foundation and the great work that you do.
Well, Gene, you always show. We look forward to seeing you once again at this event. It is the 27th year. It's held at the Cipriani Wall Street. The venue is beautiful. The event is quite spectacular. I would say it's one of the top 10 events in New York City. We expect to have between 650 to 700 people there. It's a fun night, and also it's a very important night. It's a night where we hope to raise close to $3 million, and more than 60% of that will go right to the research program, and we need it because we want to fund a large new program on aging and cancer. We have wonderful entertainment. What's their name? I always forget it, but they're a great band. The Tedeschi Trucks Band, the Fireside Five, and we also have a past member of the Allman Brothers there. So the entertainment will be over the top, and people stay until midnight, and they're clapping and dancing, etc. We have a journal also that we we will put your name into that if you can't come. We have a time where people just raise their hand and say, I want to invest in science. And during that investment period, with a paddle raise, we raise about $500,000, and we have an auction. So it is spectacular. We have had what I would consider a remarkable growth because of that. So, Gene, I hope you come out and bring as many people as you can, and your audience, who I know lots of you out there in the Hamptons and elsewhere, because I know you're more than in the Hamptons. You're really getting your name out there, Gene. Do your best to make this a success.
And Sam, what is the website for people who want to donate, learn more about your foundation, and then buy tickets to the gala?
So the website is www.waxmancancer.org/gala, or you can just go to you can go to our website in general and find it on there at waxmancancer.org. So that's what we have.
And I like it. And do you have volunteer opportunities for people, say, during the summer who are out in the Hamptons? And I know you
As you know, we have a major event in the Hamptons every year. And it's been over at Maria and Ken's Michelle's property. And I think we've had it now for about 18 years. It's been one of the longer run events out there, and it does require volunteers. We have a lot of events out there now for kids, something called Kids Cancer. We had Sweat for a Cure this past year with a bunch of volunteer people and trainers that came out and did that for an afternoon. So the opportunity is always there. And we look forward to getting young people involved. We have a good office staff, and they certainly are helpful.
Yes, and I love that you are working also with young people. I know in New York City, just a few weeks ago, I went to an event that you held at a bowling alley, and
Exactly.
it was a lot of fun.
Right. That's right. Actually, it's the third year. There are five kids their parents got involved, their grandparents got involved, and they raised close to $300,000 over the 3 years. So,
Oh, it's amazing.
yeah,
And what I love about that, Sam, is that you're bringing in young generations, starting really with children in grammar school. They're getting involved in your foundation. They're learning about philanthropy, and they're working as on a cause, which I think unites everybody, because I don't think there's one family anywhere in the world who hasn't been affected by cancer. Every family has someone, a grandfather, maybe a mother, sadly, maybe a child, but someone in the family has cancer. And so research for cancer is vitally, vitally important. Sam, we're about to end. I'd like you to give our audience once more the website for donations to purchase tickets to your November 21st gala in New York City, or just to learn more about the research that the Samuel Cancer Research Foundation does. What is the website?
so we online you can respond by going to www.waxmancancer.org/gala, or you can find our website simply by going to the Samuel Waxman Cancer Research Foundation. We have a really educational website that I think people would learn a ton if they would spend some time with it.
Sam, you have been a wonderful guest, and I think you've helped all of us understand a little bit more about cancer and what's going on. I didn't know that it was increasing in young people across the world. And I think that that information, just knowing that, makes us more cautious about what we all need to do. This concludes Successful Philanthropy. Our guest today, Sam Waxman, and Dr. Sam Waxman is the founder and the chief executive officer of the Samuel Waxman Cancer Research Foundation. I'm Jean Shafaroff, your host. I'll see you next week.